right. What are the factors of each of these? X plus 4 and x minus 12. Okay. X minus 3 squared. Oops. I just gave it away. X plus 3 times x plus 3. Forget you saw that. X plus 5. Oh, you're right. Thank you. Minus 3, minus 3. All right. So 2 of these can be simplified further, and I just gave it away. Because it's the same factor twice, I can actually write x minus 3 squared and x plus 5 squared. Well, mathematics is all about patterns. You guys think mathematics is about numbers, but that's not true. Numbers are part of mathematics, but mathematics, simply defined, is the study of relationships and patterns. And we take these patterns and we create things with it, and you really don't get to see the big picture unless you get a degree in mathematics, which, I don't know, most of you won't do. But we'll find a pattern here. So something special happens when you have a binomial squared. Remember, a binomial is 2 terms. So if you take 2 terms and you square them, you create what is called a perfect square trinomial. So both of these are perfect square trinomials. Meaning it's a trinomial with specific qualities. Do you see a pattern in x squared minus 6x plus 9 and x squared plus 10x plus 25? By the second term in the binomial, right? So he's saying, well, the coefficients here are divisible by the second term in the binomial. The coefficients here are divisible by the second term in the binomial. Well, let's go one step further. What is the pattern? How do you go from here to there? Times by 2. How do you go from here to here? Not times by 3, times by itself. Negative 3. Square it. How do you go from here to here? Times by 2, and from here to here? Square it. And that will always be the case. Anytime you have a binomial squared, you will create a perfect square trinomial which has the qualities that the middle term is double the second term in the factor, and the last term is the square of the second term in the factor. So this will actually help us out. If I had x minus 7 squared, I don't even need to use the box. It's going to be x squared minus double the second term, 14x, and then plus the square of 7, which is plus 49. Does that make sense? Okay. What if I had x plus 11 squared? X squared plus 22x plus 121. Now, this pattern actually has a lot of uses in mathematics, and we're going to use this pattern to solve quadratics that have nasty roots, or even imaginary roots, which are more nasty. Okay? We're not going to do that today, though. Today, we're just going to get used to doing what is called completing the square. Well, stay on the back side for a second. So x squared minus 8x. Okay? If I gave you the first 2 terms of a quadratic, could you figure out what the constant would need to be in order for this to be a perfect square trinomial? Some of you see it. So what we need to do is figure out what the factor is. What's the relationship between middle term and factor? It's double. The middle term is double the factor. So if the middle term is -8, then the factor would be -4. And if the factor is -4, what is my constant? 16. Any quadratic can be turned into a perfect square. Okay? Any quadratic, if you change the constant, can be turned into a perfect square. Sometimes it's a little harder, but a lot of times it's easy. X squared minus or plus 12x. What number would complete the square? Well, we need to figure out the factor. The factor would be plus 6, so the constant would be 36. Okay, that's pretty easy. What if the middle term is odd? X squared plus 5x. Now, 2.5 sounds like a good idea, right? But it's not. You'll see why in a second. So what's another way to do 2.5? 5 over 2. So we have our choice between 2.5, 2.5, or 5 over 2. They all mean the same thing, right? Well, in this class, mixed numbers do not exist. We will never use mixed numbers because they're so hard to do stuff with. How do you multiply mixed numbers? You turn them into improper fractions and multiply them and then convert them back to mixed numbers. So we're not going to bother. So mixed numbers don't work. Decimals are often easier, but today decimals are not easier. And this is why. What would my factor be? X plus 2.5. Well, what is 2.5 squared? No, that's 2.5 times 2. Well, it's some other decimal that I don't really care about. So, what we're going to do instead is, how do you divide 5 by 2? It's just 5 over 2. 5 over 2 is very easy to square. Well, 5 over 2 squared, what's 5 squared? 5 squared, 25, and 2 squared is 4. And that's how we're going to multiply those out. You can do those in your head. You don't need a calculator. You just square the top and square the bottom. Okay? What about x squared plus 11x? What would my factor be? X plus 11 over 2. So what would my constant be that completes the square? Plus 121 over 4. Okay? What if my middle term is a fraction? What about x squared? Let's do a minus. X squared minus 2/3 x. What is half of 2/3? 1/3. That was easy. So x minus 1/3. What is my constant? 1 squared is 1. 3 squared is 9. Plus 1/9. Will my constant ever be negative? Why not? Because you're squaring the factor. That's one reason. What's another reason why the constant cannot be negative in a perfect square trinomial? Squaring a negative, that would be one, okay. What about, in order to have this, what do I know about the roots? The two different roots. They have to be the same. Can you have the same root and multiply and get a negative number? No. Okay. So, this one was pretty easy. Half of 2/3 is 1/3. But what if the top is an odd number? So x squared minus 7/5 x. How do you divide a fraction in half that has an odd number on top? Well, if I took 2/3 of a pizza and I were to cut that in half, that's the same as 2/6 of a pizza. If you want to cut a fraction in half, double the denominator. And then 2/6 simplifies to be 1/3. So over here, 1 minus 7/10. If you make the denominator twice as big, that will cut the numerator in half. So if my factor is -7/10, what would my constant be? 49/100. Okay, and one more. X squared minus 11/13. So it would be x minus 121 over, or sorry, I'm doing it the wrong way. X minus 11/26. And here's where your calculator is going to come in handy. It's going to be plus 121 over, I don't know, what's 26 squared? Yeah, if you want to cut the fraction in half, double the denominator. If the top number is divisible by 2, divide the top by 2. But if the top number is not divisible by 2, then double the denominator. What's the number? Okay, let me put the answers up on the board for you. We just did 11 squared and 26 squared. All right, good luck. See if I can find the